Okay, and it's Tuesday. Welcome back. Hope you had a nice day today. A lot of people on this planet didn't, so those of you who did, bless that, and let's try and do it again tomorrow. John Rappoport joins us this first hour tonight. John has been a freelance journalist for over 3 decades. Freelance means you don't get paid much, but you do it because you love it, and it's a real privilege and honor to have the respect of those who read your writings. Hello, John. Welcome back.
Thank you, Jeff. Good to be here as always. Seems like we haven't talked in about a year, although it's only been a month.
I know. It's strange. In some cases, the time goes by and, it would be like 10 days. But for some reason, I don't know why, but you said that and it just clicked. It does seem like it's been months. I don't get it. How weird.
Events are crowding in from all sides.
Yep.
Lately, I've been taking it upon myself to look a little bit more closely at what's happening to education in this country.
What education? You mean programming?
Yes, programming, basically. One of the things that has popped up, and I'm sure you have heard of it, are aware of it, and so forth, but something called cooperative learning seems to have reared its ugly head and taken over in many schools.
A new buzz phrase. Let's talk about that. That's important. Very good.
Yes. I'm sure when you went to school, and certainly when I went to school, the whole idea was you worked on your own, you did your own homework. There was no such thing as a, quote, study group of students. You rose or fell on the merits of your own work, and the teacher was there to help you if you needed it and to show you what was what, basically, and whatever subject it was. But now you have many schools that have intentionally groups of kids who sit around and they discuss a project and they work with each other and so forth. And it obscures completely the idea of learning yourself. It's a kind of a mutual dependence group, I would call it.
If I might say this, you are so right. What this is organized, institutionalized peer group pressure conformity as opposed to individual activist thought and creative processes.
Exactly. That's perfect. Because, of course, in these groups, if you happen to say, well, I don't agree with the rest of you about this, at that point the peer pressure would begin, and there would be an attempt to coerce you, the student, into agreeing with everyone else's point of view. And,
yep. Communism.
And it's a kind of like a communist version of education right there in the classroom. It's quite amazing. I mean, when I went to college, in fact, you could get kicked out if it was proven that you were plagiarizing from another student, and now that kind of plagiarism is sort of institutionalized. I mean, it's expected.
Well, they call it research now.
Yeah, group research.
You do.
Group research.
It's all. The other basket phrase is, well, my work is derivative. Right. They use that.
Yeah, that's great. That used to be an insult.
Absolutely. You know what the University of California is caught now doing? The whole UC system and its communist czar leader, they're actually favoring illegal aliens. They're admitting them over American citizens who happen to live outside the state and are trying to transfer into the UC system. So that's step one. It's gone. I mean, it's just gone. You raised so many good points already, and I hope all of you out there listening are listening, because what John's talking about is the future. This is another means of absolute ganging up on the individual, proactive mind and driving it back into submission. These kids aren't going to do anything. It's all groupthink, group speak, group talk. Exactly right, John.
And, I've been forcing myself to read a few essays by proponents of this cooperative learning. And you're so right when you talk about communism, because they emphasize that this puts an end to competition in the classroom.
That's right, which is dangerous to the psyche of these children. We don't want to harm them. God.
That's right, And so I thought to myself, well, when I went to school, let's say junior high school and high school, there were a lot of very smart kids in the class that I was in. And so everybody was trying to get good grades and to learn the material on their own and so forth. But I never noticed any competition. It wasn't, well, what did you get? I got this. There was no kind of cliquishness and that sort of snobby type thing. You just got whatever you got, and you strove to do the best you could. And, of course, you wanted to be 100% if you could attain that. But it wasn't like people were staring at each other and trying to compete. I mean, that notion that this puts an end to competition. No, the original idea really was just, how good can I get? And that seems to be completely gone now, completely gone.
You're so right. I was just thinking back in high school, for example, junior, senior, when I'd look around the class, I wouldn't see kids trying to push their classmates down to climb over their prone bodies to get a better grade. I saw a class full of let's just call them different shades of the same basic color, all different shades. More intense intellectually, maybe a more intense color. They were all on their own track, but they were going in the same general direction, which was achievement. And they were basically performing not just on the basis of their ability, but on the basis of their drive. And that's what this groupthink takes away from people. It takes the drive away. Man, you are on it. Good job.
Yeah, you too. This is exactly what it is. There was a drive, and it was natural. You would look around and you would see, wow, she got an A+ again, fantastic, and so did this guy, and so forth. Okay, and I'm working to get my A+, and but it wasn't, there was no sense of a certain cliquishness, meme, or virus, we could call it, began to develop in schools after I was gone from the education system completely. You began to see these TV shows, for example, where the kids were all, I think it may have started in the early 60s, where the kids were presented as being in little groups and sniping at each other and competitive, and this kind of thing went on television. And then, lo and behold, that's the way kids began to behave in schools, Before that, there was nothing of that kind. You would have your friends, other people would have their friends and so forth. But in the classroom, it was drive. It was all about, okay, let's go. Let's see what we can do today. It's just amazing to me how this whole incredible transformation has taken place, where drive is no longer permitted. Now it's got to be in the group, and once you're in the group, it's got to be share everything with everybody. So at the end, nobody knows really who authored the paper or took the test, because it's just a hodgepodge of groupthink.
Right. And if you stand out, you're going to be pressured one way or the other by the group. They don't like it. Look, when you have group, you also have safety. I'm using the term advisedly. You have safety. There's safety in numbers, right? There's no accountability. If the group isn't accountable, then you don't have to worry about being held accountable. It's all the same. This is a real treacherous and dirty, dark thing they're doing to young people. I don't like it at all. It's sad because it robs people ultimately of their individuality. And that's the name of the game.
Exactly. That's the whole theme here. I remember, because I used to teach in private schools now and then.
Uh-huh.
And I remember pretty much when the curve came in. Remember the grading curve?
Yes. Yeah.
And people looked at that like, are you out of your mind? I mean, you're either going to get the score you get on the test, right?
Right.
No, not exactly, and not anymore. You're going to get some sort of a relative position on a curve in relation to everybody else in the class. Well, now you can start talking about competition, because if that's the way they started to grade students in the 1960s, then sure, you wanted your place closer to the top of the curve. And if the teacher gave a test where half the students or more failed, that was erased. That no longer, it was like, well, that's what really happened, but you see, it didn't really happen. What happened was we have a curve from the lowest to the highest, and it's not like half the kids failed. It's like rewriting history. That didn't really happen.
No child left behind.
No child left behind. Just every child left behind. Right?
Isn't it amazing? John has written a piece today. It's at Rense and certainly on his site as well, his blog. And don't forget, I'm going to repeat this. John Rappoport is so much of an honest, I'm going to use this word, visionary. He sees things that are coming. He saw this long ago. What did he name his website? For those of you who don't know, he named it NoMoreFakeNews.com. Now, if that isn't a seer of future events, I don't know what is. When did you do that? How long ago, John, was that?
2001.
Well, there you go.
2001. And you, let's see, at that time, I think your website was called Sightings, right?
I think so. I think I switched it right around then, yeah.
And that was one of the first websites that I went to when somebody forced me to go away from my typewriter and sit down and said, this is really easier, trust me. And I started to go around, and I suddenly saw your site, and I thought, my God, look at all these things. Look at all these stories. This is all no more fake news,
Well, I tried, and thank you for that.
It worked, believe me. I said, well, if this is what's happening on the Internet, let's go. And then I talked with my wife. We went through several different possible names, and I said, well, how about no more fake news? And she said, that's it. There you go.
I remember when you first started it, because I had been up and running since 94, and this, I said, this man is really smart. I knew right then. And you've never let me down. Look, here's his story today. Memo to literate people. Do you really want to shrink language? Memo to literate people. You got to think about that. And shrink the mind as well. John writes, under the onslaught of political correctness, numbing education, fake mainstream news, and other covert techniques, an attack on language is taking place. Anyone who hasn't been living in a cave can see this. The solution is go the other way. Refuse to back down. Refuse the pressure to shrink language. Reject the attempt to shrink formal argument and logic to slogans and mottos and vague generalities. If necessary, educate your own children. Teach them English and literature and logic. Thus make them smarter, not dumber. Expand their capacity to use language. And I always remember this. I don't know where I got it, but it has been demonstrably clear and proven that the bigger one's vocabulary, the more that individual gets out of what we call life and living. Think about it. Think about it.
I agree, absolutely. It's always been my perception ever since I started writing as a kid and decided, yeah, this is really what I want to do. Okay, I've got to find more words. I've got to learn how to put them together in different ways. I've got to learn how to read and analyze what I read so that I can figure out, what is the writer doing? It occurred to me at one point when I was teaching in private school that these kids, they had no idea that an author of an article was trying to make a point, and B, that he was, in the best of times, going from A to B to C to D in some line of thought to arrive at the point that he was trying to make. They could not follow a line of thought, and they didn't really even know that it existed.
Wow.
And when I occasionally was successful with some kid in showing him, and he got it, it was like the whole sky lit up. I mean, for him, for me, he would look at me as if, he had just stepped out of a rocket ship on Mars. So this is what you can do with language.
Nice story. I remember buying books for my daughter, and I would buy her vocabulary books, age appropriate, and she loved to read them. See, vocabulary is like colors on an artist's palette. Would you like to do a painting with 6 colors? I know you can mix them. I get that. Or would you rather have the potential of starting out with, say, a couple dozen, 3 dozen colors and mixing from that? That's your difference. And people just don't understand. The mind loves to grow. We only use, 5% of it allegedly, or I don't know what it is, some tiny amount. But vocabulary words. So if you have children, there are some really fun vocabulary books out there. You go to a bookstore that has books for kids and look for vocabulary books. You can play games with the words. You can have fun with your son or daughter or children and ask them to define a word. Make it fun. Make it a family home thing. It's okay. They're not going to get that kind of individual encouragement in class. And I must stop and say right now, we must all tip our hats and say thank you to Charlotte Thompson Iserbyt for her work in trying to expose the communization of the American educational government system. And her book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, is online now. I think it's free. She proves everything, every document, all the way along for the last 100 years, plus years, shows that this has all been a design, a grand scheme to subvert, coerce, and mitigate individual drive, will, achievement, and pride. There's nothing wrong with being proud if you do something well. And I've always told people, whatever it is in life you do, find what it is you like to do and do your best at it. I don't care if it's mowing lawns for a living. Doesn't matter. Just put your heart and soul into it. You will feel fulfilled. Doesn't matter if you're a rocket scientist or a landscaper. Just do it to the best of your ability. And how many people, John, that we see now, they're just floating along. They're not applying themselves. And I don't know even where to start. You got the the Gen Xers, the millennials. You got the snowflakes now. And it's only going down. The next generation will be worse. And then they'll have synthetic DNA, as we know, and you brought out on this program. And they're going to... We're in the last days of honest-to-God random individuality and accomplishment. They're taking that away from us. Scientifically, genetically, culturally, socially, it's being taken away from us. And no one is the wiser. That's why your story today is so important. Memo to literate people. Do you really want to shrink language? And we can talk about language. We had a break coming up here in a minute, but this whole thing of making everyone safe, a safe space for snowflakes. Wow, where do I puke? Come on. Anyway, there's the break, so let's do that. When we come back, we're going to talk about words and the idea of shrinking language in its totality. This is really important. And I know some of you out there really get it, and most of you probably really get it. And some of you have kids, and this is a chance to maybe influence a child to be a better, more fulfilled person. And you're also going to have to do something I really cringe at. You're going to have to tell them that they are going to be abused by their peers for being successful in many cases. The group doesn't like that. Be right back. Okay, and we're back with John Rappoport. Language, words. I get the feeling, John, I'm going to do something here I found a book during the break in my library, such as it is. The number of words that the general populace seems to be using out of their reservoir of vocabulary words is shrinking. You're talking about shrinking language. The words are not only being misused, but there are fewer of them that are appearing in our daily lives. I'm sure you see the same thing.
Yes, absolutely. I was reflecting during the break, when I entered 7th grade, we had to start taking a language, and so we had options. I think it was French, Spanish, or Latin. And for whatever reason, I decided, well, okay, I'm going to take Latin.
Wow.
So suddenly, somewhere a few months into the whole enterprise, I began to see how many English words were based on Latin roots. And it came as kind of a revelation to me. It was like, digging down into a mine and finding gold. And the teacher said, yes, that's right. Many English words are based on Latin roots. And I began to feel that I had an additional dimension in studying English, grammar from Latin, vocabulary from Latin. There were so many connections that I became much more confident about English as I learned Latin. And the other thing that amazed me, and it still does, and I don't know whether linguists have tried to explain this, I've never seen it, but for example, take the English word reject. Okay, so you have re, which in Latin means back, as in, say, pushing back or going back.
Retro.
And then, yeah, and then you have reject, and the ject part comes from jacere, which is a Latin verb that means to throw or hurl. And if you look into that, you'll find the Latin word for spear, as in throwing a spear. So you're throwing a spear back. That's the root of reject. So somewhere in the history of Latin, and this is the part that amazed me. The people were using the yakare very physically, on a physical level. Yeah, it means you take a spear and you throw it back at your enemy and so forth and so on. And then some individual, it wasn't a group, folks, it wasn't a cooperative learning group, probably a poet, put it together and began to abstract the whole idea into the notion of rejecting something. Somebody says something, you reject it. You say no. Now we're operating with that same root from a very physical event, throwing a spear, into the idea of rejecting an argument, rejecting a position, rejecting what's supposed to be a fact. That level of abstraction occurred somewhere along the line in the history of Latin to that word and hundreds of other words, so that the sophistication of the culture and the civilization rose to an entirely new level, where people were aware of a kind of interaction among people and culture and so forth at a level they had never considered before. It just, that sort of thing still blows my mind. And that's the expansion of language. You're talking about now taking a root, and somebody comes along and says, well, I can make this into a word, 3 words, 4 words, 5 words that have different shades of meaning on different levels. And that's how one of the ways in which language expands. And now the trend, as you just read there, and as anybody can see in schools, is to shrink it down, reduce it down, so that you're, okay, let's speak more simply and write more simply so more people can understand, and blah, 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 blah. And finally you end up with this incredible dumbness.
It's all of that, John, you've stated it perfectly, and it's so dangerous. Language and words and vocabulary are, in a way, the life force of a functional culture. I mean, that's not saying anything profound. I think it is. I found this book, and it's a great little book. It's Webster's New World Power Vocabulary. Pump up your word power with 90 challenging and entertaining vocabulary workouts. This is what I got from my daughter years ago. And
Great.
I just opened it up, and it has a section where it just has words, just vocabulary words, groups of them. Here, I just opened the page to V. Variable, variegate, verbatim, verbose, verdict, verify, verity, vernacular, vestige, viability, vicarious. All right, now these are really not college professor words, but they're really nice words that you don't hear in too many conversations from young people anymore. You just don't hear them. Now, there's another section here, just to give you an idea how these books are very, very useful. Do you imagine sitting down with your grandchild or your child? Okay. Farther, pertaining to distance, versus further, pertaining to time or degree. Now, those words are constantly misused.
Right.
Farther and further. As his broken foot healed, he was able to walk farther each day. Or, we can pursue the issue further at our next meeting. Now, this is a very simplistic demonstration of what words that sound similar have to offer us. Tremendous diversity in meaning. Here's one more. Feasible versus possible. All right, now I'll rewind. Feasible, meaning capable of being done, it's doable, versus possible, capable of existing or happening. If we have enough time, it's feasible that we can repair the leak completely. People who live in California are aware that a major earthquake is possible at any time. Two similar words with marvelous shades and variations. And then there are the little vocabulary tests in the back of this particular book. There must be several dozen different sections. Here, there's a test. A conscientious employer does not blank an employee in front of others. 1. Initiate. 2. Upbraid. 3. Obfuscate. Or 4. Usurp. A conscientious employer does not blank an employee in front of others. Initiate, upbraid, obfuscate, or usurp. Now, the sharp people will say, well, usurp fits in there. Yeah, it could fit, depending on the circumstances. Obfuscate, long shot. Initiate. Now, what don't you do in front of other people to somebody? You upbraid them. You discipline them. You put them in their place. You humiliate them. Therefore, a conscientious employer does not upbraid an employee in front of others. That's just one little thing. Now, if you did that with your kid, just that one thing once a day, and don't even go back over it, I'm telling you it'll stick. And these things will be there in the subconscious mind and conscious mind of the child or young person you're working with, or even yourself. These are fun to do just as a matter of picking up a book and giving your mind a little workout. Again, these aren't rocket science words, but okay, that's my little pitch.
That's fantastic. My experience, and I know the experience of others, whether they articulate it or not, is when your vocabulary expands to a certain point, and when you can make the kinds of distinctions that you were just going over, shades of meaning and so forth, you reach a certain critical mass where you realize that you're now more intelligent than you were before. And it's not an illusion. It's true. You are. Because your ability to use language and to understand it has reached a point where, by whatever measure you want to use, your intelligence now changes, and thus also your confidence. You literally enter a new world. You say, oh, wow, I see more now. I can think more clearly now. I can express myself to a higher degree than I was able to do before because I can use more words, and therefore I don't have to keep coming back to the same hackneyed explanations and notions about things and so forth. And now when you read and you see what passes for so-called information, it's often a joke. You can understand, well, this person is operating at a huge deficit here, and I don't have to be part of that.
Right.
This really is about the preservation of culture. And as we touched on earlier, because the greater your reach with language and your understanding of language, then you keep on rising up into higher and higher levels. The more you derive from living life, being alive, you go out and you look and you see 1,000 colors, or would you rather go out and look and see 2 or 3 colors? I see a gray sky, I see brown hills, I see green trees. No, there's an infinite number of things out there to be seen.
And that's another thing that we're dealing with. These people who sit in front of television and go into that altered state, which takes only a few seconds, and you're gone. And you're programmed and being programmed, because everything that is being poured into your conscious and subconscious mind no longer is being held up for evaluation, judgment, understanding, or any kind of definitive process. It just goes right in. It just pours in there, and you are programmed.
Exactly. A long time ago, when I was still teaching, I was walking down the street one day in Los Angeles, and I came across a little storefront, a company that had some sort of education in the title, and I just, on the spur of the moment, I walked in. This was I'm going to say right around the time when personal computers were being put on the market for the first time. Mm-hmm. And the boss was sitting there in a little office, and he seemed very friendly. We started talking. And he said, well, what we do here is we put out these booklets for remedial learning. And it encompasses many different subjects, and they're becoming quite popular and so on and so forth. And I said, well, I think a great idea would be if you had a logic booklet or a series of booklets. He said, well, we haven't tried that yet, and so forth. He said, well, go home. Take a booklet, see how we do it, write a few pages, bring it back to me. And I came back, and he looked over what I had, and he said, no, this is not what we do at all. And I said, why not? He said, well, after every new point that you introduce, you have a whole series of exercises that you're giving the student in order to test their ability to understand and use this concept that you just introduced. You have 10 or 15, 20 of these. He said that makes everything much too long. We only want 2 or 3 examples, and then if they don't get them right, we've sort of branched them off. They used to call this branched learning. And we do a little tiny kind of remedial section, ask them a couple more questions. If they get those right, we come back to the main trunk of the subject. I said, well, that's not going to work. He said, why not? I said, because that's not the way kids learn. You can only learn and become confident if you have enough exercises and drills to see whether you can really take this word and use it or this concept and apply it. He said, well, that's not the way we teach anymore. And this went back and forth. And, I almost came to blows with this guy. I said, you don't even know the first thing about teaching. You're just conning everybody is what you're doing, and selling these little booklets, which are really worthless. And they're even less than worthless because you're now going to take a kid who's already failed at something. You're going to give him this remedial course, and he's going to fail again. And that's what you're going to do, and you're selling this.
Good for you.
Well, of course, that didn't go anywhere.
No.
But again, we see how, the shrinkage factor comes in. Well, we don't have to really make sure that you understand each concept as we go along. We don't have to make sure you understand what a word it means and so forth and so on. It doesn't matter. It's just all mechanical anyway. And plus, you've got a group you can sit around with. It's a disaster, a complete disaster.
Tying in with that, absolutely, inextricably, is the term attention span. It's gone. These kids can't look at something and stay absorbed in it for more than a few seconds. If that. Now, they're just on to the next thing. It's like a bee going from flower to flower, just getting a drink of pollen or whatever it is they do.
Television has a lot to do with that.
Oh, it's everything. This is true. When I was in college, I would watch. I lived in a house right on the beach for 9 years. I was really lucky, and I surfed all the time, and I had a wonderful life. But I worked hard, and I would come in, and there'd be 2 or 3 of my roommates. I think I had 3. Anyway, they'd be watching TV, and I'd look in the room, and they'd be staring at the television. And they were gone. And I knew it then. I said, oh, my God, they're gone. They're not with me in real time in this house, in this location. They're in that television. They have been taken over. And I saw it then, And then I actually got a yellow legal pad, and on Saturday morning when they had kids, so-called kids programming, which was fairly innocuous then, it's insidiously horrible now, but I would count in a 60-second commercial or a 30-second commercial. They used to do a lot more 30s in a kids program. There'd be a couple 30s, which would make a 60 block. And I would count in a 30-second commercial, I would write down a slash mark for every scene change, zoom, or reverse zoom, or pan that I saw in that commercial. And often in 30 seconds, there would be over 60 different scene changes, zooms, pans, reverse.
Wow.
And it was obvious that they were trying to degrade the attention spans of young people and look at the fruit that has borne.
Wow, that's quite an experiment. Yeah, absolutely.
No one would listen to me. I didn't even bother telling anybody except a few, and they didn't seem to. Oh, really? Well, nobody cared. But yeah, this is all about attention span and depriving people of their God-given right to
All you have to do is go back
use
and
it.
watch some of the historically great black and white movies.
Uh-huh.
And the first thing you notice is that the pace is completely different.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You have a scene, something is happening, there's a conversation. Nobody seems to be in a gigantic hurry. You can get involved with the characters and, of course, the storyline, and you see what's going on. You're not dragged into it the way that these commercials, as you described, do it, And then watch a few of those and then come back to some kind of slam-bang action movie of the present. And the difference is visceral. You're now being dragged around by your hair every few seconds.
Yeah, and forced to watch what? Violence?
Nothing.
Murder?
Yeah, explosions, murder.
Nothing of any cerebral substance. All eye candy. Nothing there. No, nothing.
Exactly. Absolutely nothing. It's quite amazing. There was a period of time, I'm going to say maybe 5 or 6 years, when I didn't watch any television whatsoever. And then one day, I don't know why, I had a little black and white set, and I turned it on to one of the late-night talk shows. And I just, it was like visiting a subterranean universe. The fakery and the phoniness of the attitudes of everybody was so apparent to me after taking that long vacation that I could not understand why anybody would watch this. And yet, when I sat there for about a half hour watching it, I could feel myself slipping back into that hypnotized state where, okay, well, it's all right. This is the way they are. This is what it is. Just accept it. Wow. I mean, that's some pretty strong mind control.
Oh, they take people down into almost theta brainwave states now. And every so-called funny line is guaranteed a laugh because they have computer laugh tracks and they're very slick. They'll have a live audience and they'll juice it up to the level they think that the star of the program deserves. And when you hear people laughing, you say, well, that must be funny. Never mind that it isn't funny, and you're asking yourself, well, that's not funny. Why are they laughing? Most people, I don't even think, go that far, but it's pretty grim. Television, almost 30 years for me, no TV. Not on a regular basis. I occasionally look at it, and I am absolutely appalled at the commercials now. A 60-second spot is like a mini motion picture. Boom, 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 boom. And it's amazing. The colors, a cascade, a kaleidoscope of colors is just bombing you with imagery. And anyway, and there are all these stereotypical roles being presented now. You look at these commercials, and this isn't racist. You watch commercials and you'd figure about 40% of America was black, for example. You don't get an honest representation of what this society is structured like. It's just
everything
not there.
is pre-plotted on political correctness.
All PC.
Down to the last ad, you know.
Yeah.
There's
Exactly.
a lot more that we could get into maybe the next time that we talk. I did a whole gigantic piece by getting the tape from NBC. I was surprised they even sent it to me, of the Tonight Show with Jay Leno on the night that Arnold Schwarzenegger announced that he was going to run for governor of California. And it was about 20 minutes. And I watched it maybe 20 or 30 times. I took notes on all the dialogue, all the audience reactions, every little tiny bit, as to how that thing was programmed within an inch of its life to extract the maximum amount of enthusiasm from a completely artificially hyped up audience in the studio that won him the election on that very night. That was the end of the campaign right there.
Wow. Well, let's talk about that, because that's how politics is played now, and you were very, very astute to do that. That's amazing. We'll talk, John, about that next time. Thank you for everything you do and all your wonderful writing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
Mr. John Rappoport, and you can find a wonderful link to his articles and essays on the left-hand side at Rense, so take a look, and we'll be back. 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 Take a look, and we'll be back.